Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink program. I'm your host, Carolyne. Coming up, we have been brewing something punchy for a while, an episode dedicated entirely to coffee. We sit down with an acclaimed barista to find out why there are dozens of recipes to try when you're after the perfect cup.
Good coffee should be for everybody. I would love everybody to be able to access and have and experience good coffee.
Also on the programme, we're at Copenhagen's Noma to explore their new venture into roasting beans.
These are the kinds of stories that we want to build in this subscription. It's like an invitation to come with us as we figure it out, as we find the form for the values that we're trying to communicate.
Plus, we check into the world's first coffee hotel. All that here in The Menu on Monocle Radio. Copenhagen's culinary heavyweight Noma is well known for experimenting in all sorts of gastronomic pursuits. Now, the restaurant has turned its hand to coffee by launching its new coffee membership, Noma Kaffee. The idea is to source beans from farms from Mexico to Ethiopia and Colombia that operate to the agricultural and environmental standards you'd expect from this institution and ship them to subscribers all around the world. The project has been spearheaded by Carolyne, who spent years in Noma's test kitchen, specialising in coffee and tea. Earlier, Monocle's Gabriele Delisanti paid her a visit to find out more about sourcing and selecting the right beans and get her tips on how to craft the perfect brew.
If you ask Carolyne Lane for her title at Noma, she'll say jokingly that she's the restaurant's chief infusions officer. And while that might not be her official title, it perfectly captures her role since joining the team in 2018. That is, extracting flavor from a variety of ingredients through infusion, roasting, and oxidizing. Among these is coffee. One of Carolyne's key responsibilities has been overseeing Noma's official coffee program. The cup of coffee served to guests at the end of their multi-course meal. The challenge was to develop a signature approach, crafting a brew that was neither too strong nor too light. Most recently, this effort has led to a major step: the launch of Noma's own roasted coffee. It delivers 2 types of coffee each month, accompanied by a note from the Noma team complete with brewing instructions and flavor notes. But to understand what led to this milestone, Carolyne walks me through Noma's journey, from brewing all the way to roasting.
I started working at Noma some 7 years ago. I arrived as a very excited and energetic, enthusiastic young person, interested in a lot of things, and saw Noma as a kind of really amazing venue to kind of test all of those interests, see more or less where I landed. Very quickly that became within the kind of coffee and tea sphere of the restaurant, mostly because actually those are the things that I can see myself drinking every day, especially coffee. It's something that I drink once or twice a day. And often it's kind of regarded as a bit of an afterthought in the restaurant experience. And the thing that drew me to this place was actually coffee. I heard about Noma when watching YouTube videos of the 2013 Nordic Roasters Forum, where Rene delivered this speech where he kind of pledged to have a world-class coffee service at Noma. And I, young coffee nerd that I was, I was super impressed and thought, wow, it would be super interesting to brew coffee in a restaurant. Because of course that's different than brewing coffee in a cafe. This guy seems kind of interesting. And lo and behold, the following year I was working there. I arrived, I had all of these interests. I was super impressed by the coffee program, really impressed that, we did pour over black coffee and espresso, and we measured the extraction of all of the coffee that we served and applied a very kind of scientific and quality-driven approach to what we were doing. And over the years, we developed a kind of language and like an identity, and we realized that actually this way of brewing is not necessarily the best way for our specific context. So we started to devise a new way of brewing coffee. And where we landed was that we more or less made a hybrid brewing method. It's somewhere in between a filter coffee and an espresso. And the reason we do that is because at the end of a 20-course meal, the palate becomes very tired, and an espresso is simply too strong, and a filter coffee is simply not strong enough. So we started making some more intentional decisions in regards to how we brew coffee. And of course, when you're at the point at which you are considering so deeply how you brew, it only makes sense that you apply that same perspective throughout the whole supply chain. So then it kind of became a no-brainer to start sourcing and roasting it too.
Until now, the restaurant has worked with Oslo-based roastery Tim Vendelbo. But a few years ago, the idea emerged. Once Noma's coffee program was fully developed, roasting in-house would be the natural next step. The program that Carolyne helped develop is, in short, centered on using a light roast in an espresso machine, with the ability to dilute the coffee to achieve the desired intensity. So for Noma, roasting their own beans wasn't just about refining their approach to serving coffee. It was about fostering long-term relationships with farmers around the world and reaching a wider audience beyond their guests. A way of sharing the journey behind each cup of coffee, from the careful selection of beans to the connections Carolyne and the team have built along the way.
Researching the coffee industry in-depthly, a lot of times when we begin a new project, we begin with an abstract idea. We don't begin with the form fully fleshed out. So when we pledged to go to Kyoto to open a restaurant or a pop-up, the idea is, okay, we're going to imagine that Noma was always based in Kyoto. And then we figure out along the way what form that takes. Likewise with the coffee project. So our task was to imagine how a Noma coffee roastery would be. Like, what would this look like if Noma was always a coffee roastery? I think that's a good way to put it, actually. So this always begins with research. For the pop-up, that involves a team of people going to Japan, traveling Japan, coming to understand the place, this new territory that we're entering. And it's only by understanding that you have to treat that industry with a great deal of respect. You can't assume that you know everything and you enter a new place and you'll immediately contribute. And that research took the shape of visiting a lot of different roasteries, also Tim's, spending time roasting with different teams, spending time behind different bars, talking to a lot of different people. You can taste that the Mexican coffees in the first subscription are grown differently. They taste floral and bright and very atypical. These are coffees that I first encountered in 2018 when I first joined the Noma team, actually. I was really, really touched by one coffee in particular grown by a lady called Berta Incin. It was unlike any Mexican coffee that I'd ever tried. And when we came back to this project, I was looking for these particular coffees. And it was funny because I described this story to an exporter that we work with, or the exporter that we work with in Mexico. His name is Jesus. I described this espresso to him, and he kind of smiled cheekily, and he was presenting some coffees to us, and we tasted all of these coffees completely blind, and I pointed at 4, and I was like, these are amazing. And the cheeky smile turns into like laughter. And I say, why are you laughing? He's like, well, that espresso you told me about, the Garnica from Berta Incin, well, this is also Garnica, and it's also grown by the Incin family. It's just grown by all of her family members, more or less. So picking this coffee out blind from a table, that's a pretty special, like, full circle thing. I think you can instinctively recognize when a coffee carries this energy. And these are the kinds of stories that we want to build in this subscription. It's like an invitation to come with us as we figure it out, as we find the form for the values that we're trying to communicate. The values of, of course, taste, but also of respect for context, for nature, for knowledge, also for native wisdom. It's a very different thing to source coffee in Mexico than it is in Colombia, than it is in Ethiopia. It's a very different pop-up to do in Mexico than in Japan.
I couldn't leave without asking one last question. How does Carolyne enjoy her daily coffee? Her favorite is a simple V60 pour-over. But for her, as she tells me, the key takeaway is that the perfect brew isn't universal, it's personal.
I have a cup of coffee every single morning, right? So I brew it the same way every day. And, when I'm at work, that's when I'm kind of playful. But first thing in the morning, I want a cup of V60 pour-over coffee. That is what I want. And it's not what we serve at the restaurant anymore, but it is, in my mind, the perfect way to start a morning. But, I've also brewed coffee in a number of... I've also, for example, boiled coffee over a fire when camping, or any number of things. But, using fresh but rested beans is, for me, an important thing. Rested because you want some of the carbon dioxide trapped in the bean in that roasting process to dissipate. What ends up happening is that acts as a barrier between the water and the ground coffee. So my personal recommendation is use rested coffee, so 2-3 weeks off the roast day is ideal. I think this is sometimes a little bit of a myth, that you have to use super freshly roasted coffee. So using rested, high-quality beans, using filtered water, grinding it fresh, observing measurements when you're brewing as well. That's just going to help you make more replicable recipes, help you stay consistent. And then otherwise, there are no other rules as far as I'm concerned. Just play around until you find what makes sense for you.
For Monocle in Copenhagen, I'm Gabriele Delisanti.
Thanks, Gabriele. This is the menu. Coffee means something different to each of us depending on where we are based in the world. Head to a specialty cafe anywhere and you'll be presented with extensive menus listing the many different combinations of water, milk and espresso that can make anything from a cappuccino to a piccolo or a cortado. But there's even more variety to what we can make with coffee than what's on our regular order rotation. An accomplished barista as well as a writer, author Celeste Wong has collected 90 different recipes for a morning cup into coffee creation. In the book, she teaches amateurs how to perfect the classics, but also encourages them to discover variants they never considered before. Beyond the perfect pour, there's espresso martinis, a coffee sauce for beef, flat white cookies, and plenty more besides. Contributor Sebastian Stevenson pulled up a stool at Celeste's chosen coffee spot and started by asking her who the book is for.
There's so much that I want to sort of address in that question. I think, as you can probably see, I've been a professional in the specialty coffee industry for such a long time that I did realise it was quite niche. What feels like such a big world to us is actually quite small. And I realised that actually coffee, good coffee, specifically good coffee, should be for everybody. I would love everybody to be able to access and have and experience good coffee. But I also am not judgmental if people do drink other coffees, say for instance, instant coffee, or I'm just happy that people love it. But I do like to encourage people to try higher quality, better coffees. I mean, that's just sort of, if we can have better, that's what I would choose, and that's what I would choose for my friends and family. So I want to make coffee accessible for everybody. There are so many books out there and so much information on the internet that is so technical. It can just be a little bit intimidating, I think, for people in terms of coffee, because a lot of people think they know a lot about coffee, and I'm sure they do, but also a lot of people feel like they don't know that much. But because we're so specific and the industry itself talk in a different way, it can feel a little bit intimidating. So I don't want people to feel intimidated by coffee, because I want them to have a good experience with it. So my book intends to give all the necessary fundamentals on how to make coffee, explains where coffee came from, say, for example, the different processes, all the fundamental things you need to know about coffee and brewing coffee at home. And the recipes are kind of a way to experiment and try and, have fun with it and, share it and do all of those things while having all of the, traditional coffees in there. Because I get a lot of questions like, what is a flat white? What is a macchiato? What is a cortado? What is a Vienna? Those are quite traditional coffees where you'd see them on a menu. So that's sort of how I chaptered that. And then there are all these other recipes in there that when you do gain more confidence and knowledge about coffee, you can try these other recipes like the espresso martini. So I do some variations like vanilla and apple brandy espresso martini and a rum and lime espresso, caramel macchiato martini, a mocha martini. I also talk about cold brew because people often confuse iced coffee with cold brew, and they're not actually the same thing.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, because even for someone who's into coffee, I didn't quite identify the distinction. So maybe just actually briefly, say what the distinction you make in the book is.
Okay, yeah. So iced coffee is generally, if you get an iced coffee, it would be ice with espresso snap chilled on top, and then you would add, if it's an iced latte, you'd add milk on top, cold milk. And cold brew is actually brewed in cold water. So at different temperatures, you get different characteristics of coffee. So with hot brewed coffee, the extraction is a lot faster and just has a different intensity. With cold brew, if you're brewing with cold water, it takes a lot longer. So you're often steeping the coffee for maybe 12 hours to 24 hours to extract all of the coffee and the flavour out. And what happens is actually you get a slight difference in acidity. So the acidity is generally less for a cold brew. So it's really, and also I think it brings out a lot of the sweetness and just different flavours. So it's a really nice kind of softer, but can be very intense as well because you're brewing it for such a long time.
So maybe to give an idea of the spectrum of the kind of coffee with food or food with coffee recipes, we might look at a salad dressing that you came across. Maybe tell me more about this. This was I came across this hey, this is certainly something.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So actually, I was inspired by a trip to Milan a few years ago, and I went to a place called Taglio. And there was a great chef there who came out. I think he had heard of me and was super hospitable and, made coffee at the table for us. But then he really impressed us by bringing out some bread and, usually you have a vinaigrette with balsamic and olive oil and salt and pepper. And he was like, oh, what do you think? And I was looking at it and it looked like a regular sort of vinaigrette. But he was like, oh, I actually put espresso in it. It's not balsamic. And I was like, what? I'd never experienced that before. And it was amazing. And so I wanted to do my own version. And I shared it in the book, because it was great. And it's just a really fun way to sort of just to experiment with food and different flavors.
You're obviously keen on providing perhaps a bridge between people who would like to know more but aren't quite getting into brew ratios quite yet. So I don't know if there's a from the book or even a tip you might give for how to brew their cup of coffee that little bit better, or something they should focus on or anything like that.
I think the main I do go over a lot of these things. I think there's a lot of all the fundamental things that people need to know about coffee and making coffee is all in the book. But the thing my tip would be have good quality coffee. I think that's really important. If you can get a good grinder, that's your best friend. And then it just depends on what kind of coffee you like. So whether it's a more of a filter coffee or whether it's espresso. I talk about there are also benefits of pod machines or automatic bean to cup machines or manual machines. Yeah, I would just say get really good quality coffee. Make sure you have it ground well, or you could go to your local cafe and ask the barista and tell them what kind of brew method you use, and they can grind it with their professional, with their industry grinders for you.
Sebastian Stevenson there, speaking to Celeste Wong. This is The Menu. Now it's time for the week's top food and drink headlines. Here is Monocle's Monica Lillis.
The White House has unveiled its annual Christmas ornament dedicated to the art of culinary diplomacy. Revealed earlier this week, it honours 150 years of state dinners at the residence. The design features the red china plate of Ronald Reagan's administration on one side and the gold-rimmed china plate of Bill Clinton's on the other. Japanese company Fujitsu has invented a new machine that can gauge the desirable fat levels of a tuna fish without the need for human skills. The technology, called Sonify, uses AI-assisted ultrasound waves to draw a diagram to indicate the fish's fattiness in just 12 seconds. The machine is set to go on sale in June for around €182,000. And finally, the chocolate brand Toblerone will once again feature Swiss imagery on its packaging. After moving part of its operations to Slovakia in 2023, it could no longer legally use the Swiss-made label or the iconic Matterhorn image. However, fresh investment from parent company Mondelez will allow the production to move back to Switzerland, and therefore the reintroduction of the nation's symbols. Those are the week's food and drink headlines. Now back to Chiara.
Thanks, Monica. You're listening to The Menu. And finally, being able to make a great coffee is fundamental to any morning, but particularly so if you run a hotel. That's not an issue at the world's first hotel dedicated to the stuff. Stay the night at Man met Bril Coffee Hotel in Rotterdam and you'll wake up to an exceptional cup of joe. Breathing new life into a derelict townhouse complex, the hospitality venture has brought a whiff of roasted beans to the space, which features 20 suites, a roastery, a bar and a restaurant. Their standout feature, though, is residencies for coffee professionals looking to elevate their skills. Ilse Vitola paid a visit and met founder and owner Paul Schauer to find out more.
I'm Paul. I'm the owner and founder of Mama Bril Coffee. We're a very local micro-roastery in Rotterdam. I founded the company about 13 years ago with the idea of doing something special for Rotterdam, selling really high-end, good coffee to the people around me. At that time, all my friends working in hospitality and doing cool stuff would go to Amsterdam because everything was happening there, and it kind of annoyed me. So I decided to do something just for Rotterdam. Now, of course, we sell to other cities too, but that was the initial idea. We source our own coffee beans, we roast them, we sell them, and we make drinks at the cafe. It's what people would call from bean to cup. We handle the whole process, and now we're opening a coffee hotel. The hotel's location is very special. We're in the Krooswijk neighborhood, on the banks of the Rotterdam, which is where Rotterdam actually gets its name from. It was sort of a blue-collar working-class neighborhood, and Heineken had his first brewery here, but gentrification pushed production further out of the city. Now, with having the roastery on site at the hotel, we're bringing back the legacy of craftsmanship to the area. We want to be part of a local community, a gathering place where anyone can walk in, work, or hang out. We're open from 6 to 6. Since 13 years ago, we opened our first cafe, we noticed a shift in our clientele. Especially on weekends, we started getting tourists, and not just day trippers from Amsterdam, but also visitors coming from abroad, especially to see Rotterdam. That's how we thought of making a hotel. So the people who visit us for coffee would actually stay in the city longer. It's a destination for people who love to drink coffee, but we're not going over the top. We don't expect pillowcases made out of coffee bags, stuff like that. Essentially, we're a coffee roastery, and that's reflected in our design, tiles, industrial details, simple and clean aesthetics. But when guests order coffee via room service, it'll be as high quality as what you would get at our coffee bar. But what's crucial in the hotel is also a destination for people who love making coffee. We're offering the world's first coffee residency program. Around 8 residents, coffee professionals from all over the world, will stay at the hotel for a few months, working side by side, learning from each other, and serving our guests incredible coffee. The idea was sort of born out of necessity. In the coffee business, employees are extremely important. Finding great talent in the coffee industry is hard. So when a good employee leaves because they don't see the way to grow their skills, it sucks. But instead of selfishly thinking about how to keep them longer, we thought, let's invite talent and let it bloom and grow with us. The residency isn't just for baristas, it's for anyone passionate about coffee culture. Our first round includes coffee professionals from Spain, Germany, Italy, the UK, and even Australia. We have a dedicated space for workshops and barista courses for anyone interested. Our roastery is separated from the cafe by a window, so guests can watch the roasting process firsthand. Transparency really is at the heart of Noma Kaffee. And now we also offer a filter coffee bar. It's a tailor-made experience similar to speakeasies, where mixologists craft cocktails to suit each drinker. We wanted to be more than just serving coffee. We aim to create a dialogue and even a culture exchange between visitors and resident baristas. The experience is elevated with paired sweets and other treats. Of course, we have plenty of other options for those who don't drink coffee. We make our own sodas, we offer a wide selection of teas, and we even have some wine and beer. We also do breakfast and lunch. The food is as local and sustainable as possible. We have a young, super ambitious and creative chef, Bril, who previously worked at the Michelin-starred Noble Kitchen. Our taste and the taste of our clientele have matured. So no avocado toast. Instead, it's what you might call an elevated comfort food, such as katsu sando with slow-cooked beef, lobster rolls, and silverware, all served in a relaxed, visually pleasing setting. Of course, we're a business and we want you to buy something, but if you just get a cup of coffee and spend all day here working or hanging out, that's totally fine with us. And you can even stay the night. We really honor craftsmanship. Most of our interior is made by Dutch, if not Rotterdam creatives. Above the coffee counter, we have an anodized light installation created by a local sustainable design studio, Loop Loop. Next to that, we have a massive artwork by Dutch artist Thomas Trum. He creates these colossal, colorful canvases using gigantic brushes. It's really very unique. But the most special item, which I'm very excited about, is our espresso machine. You won't find another like this one in the world. It's made by Dutch espresso maker Kees van der Westen. He grouped 3 different espresso machines together. That has never been done before. It includes a hydromatic lever espresso machine combined with 2 regular machines operating at 9 bars of pressure. Because of this, we call it Frank. short for Frankenstein. There's a huge shift in demand for decaf. People are ordering it more. Right now, decaf makes up 8% of all the coffees we roast, which is huge. If you had told me that 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. The quality of decaf has improved immensely too. There used to be a stigma around decaf in the specialty coffee industry, but now even the top names are vouching for it.
Thanks, Ilse. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's a midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune into our spin-off show Food Neighborhoods for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Carolyne. This program was produced by Monocle Radio and our sound engineer was Flynn Simons. Thanks for listening, and until next week.